Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who was supposed to love you, only to realize they saw you as completely worthless? They say blood is thicker than water. They say family is a safety net, the one place in the world where you are always supposed to belong. But my mother, Eleanor, didn't believe in safety nets. She believed in status. She believed in control. And more than anything, she believed in her golden child, my older brother, Julian. For as long as I can remember, I was the outsider in my own family. If Julian got a B on a test, he was celebrated. If I got an A, it was expected, or worse, ignored. When Julian crashed his first car, my mother bought him a new one. When my car broke down while I was working 2 jobs to pay for college, she told me that hardship builds character. I accepted it. I thought that if I just worked harder, if I became more successful, if I showed her respect, she would finally look at me with love in her eyes. But I was wrong. Because a person's heart doesn't change just because you want it to. And the true cruelty of my mother didn't fully show itself until my daughter, Lily, was born. Lily was a miracle. She was born with a gentle spirit, bright eyes, and a laugh that could clear the darkest clouds from any room. My husband, David, and I didn't have much, but we gave Lily the world. We taught her kindness, patience, and love. But there was one thing I couldn't give her: a loving grandmother. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family gathering was a twisted game of favorites. Eleanor would shower Julian's children with expensive gifts, affection, and praise. Lily would receive afterthought presents, cheap broken toys, or sometimes nothing at all. I tried to shield her. I tried to make excuses for Eleanor. "Grandma is just forgetful, sweetheart," I would whisper, my heart breaking into a million pieces as I watched my 8-year-old daughter look at her cousins, wondering what she had done wrong. Then came the summer that changed everything. My father had passed away 2 years prior. His passing left a massive void in my life. He was the only one who ever truly saw me. He was a quiet man, a man of few words, but his love was loud. He used to take me to the family lake house every summer when I was a little girl. That lake house wasn't just wood and stone. It was a sanctuary. It was where I learned to swim, where we watched the sunsets, and where I felt safe from my mother's constant criticism. After he passed, Eleanor took complete control of the family dynamics. Or so she thought. It was a scorching July afternoon. The annual family summer reunion at the lake house was happening. I didn't want to go. Every instinct in my body told me to stay home, to protect Lily from the subtle poison of my mother's words. But Lily had been talking about the lake for weeks. She wanted to see the water. She wanted to feel close to the grandfather she missed so dearly. So, against my better judgment, we packed our bags and drove up to the property. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, the sight of the beautiful, 2-story wooden house overlooking the crystal blue water brought a tear to my eye. But the moment we stepped onto the wraparound porch, the warmth vanished. Eleanor was sitting in a wicker chair, holding a glass of iced tea. Julian and his wife were beside her, laughing. When Eleanor saw me, her smile instantly dropped. "Oh," she said, her voice cold and flat. "You actually came." "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful for Lily's sake. Uncle Julian. Look how big the lake is," Lily chirped, stepping forward with her little backpack. Eleanor didn't even look down at her. Instead, she stared directly at me. "I didn't think you'd have the nerve to show up, Clara. Especially considering this is a private family weekend." I froze. "What do you mean, Mom? I am family. Lily is family." Eleanor took a slow sip of her tea, set it down on the table, and stood up. She smoothed down her expensive linen dress and looked at my daughter with total disdain. "Family is a strict term, Clara," Eleanor said, loud enough for everyone on the porch to hear. "Julian's children carry our legacy. They are built for this lifestyle. But your girl? She doesn't fit in here. She's not real family. And honestly, I don't want her ruining the weekend for the children who actually matter." The porch went completely silent. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the lake waves against the dock. I looked at Julian, expecting him to say something, to defend his niece. But he just looked away, smirking, sipping his drink. I looked down at Lily. Her eyes were wide, pooling with tears. She didn't fully understand the weight of the words, but she understood the tone. She knew she was being rejected. She gripped my hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. An anger like I had never felt before began to boil in my chest. It wasn't just a spark, it was a roaring fire. You can insult me. You can mistreat me. You can ignore me for 30 years. But the moment you look at my innocent child and tell her she doesn't belong, that is the moment the line is crossed. What did you just say? My voice trembled, not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated rage. Eleanor sighed, as if she were completely bored by my reaction. You heard me, Clara. Take your daughter and leave. This lake house is for my family. And she is not family. I opened my mouth to scream at her, to unleash decades of suppressed pain. But before I could speak, a black luxury sedan pulled up the gravel driveway, stopping right behind my modest car. The door opened, and a man in a sharp, tailored gray suit stepped out, carrying a thick leather briefcase. It was Mr. Vance, my late father's personal attorney. Eleanor's demeanor immediately changed. She wiped the scowl off her face and replaced it with a fake, welcoming smile. Mr. Vance. What a surprise. I told you we could handle the final estate details at my city home next week. Mr. Vance didn't smile back. He adjusted his glasses, looked at Eleanor, then looked at me, and finally down at Lily. Actually, Eleanor, Mr. Vance said, his voice echoing across the quiet porch, the final details cannot wait. And based on what I just heard you say through my open window, you are going to want to sit down for this. The atmosphere on the porch shifted instantly. The air became heavy, thick with sudden tension. Julian stood up from his chair, his smug expression replaced by a look of confusion. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she watched Mr. Vance walk up the wooden steps, his leather briefcase clicking tightly in his hand. Mr. Vance, I don't appreciate the tone, Eleanor said, trying to maintain her posture of absolute authority. This is a private family gathering. Whatever legal nonsense my late husband left behind can surely wait until Monday. No, Eleanor. It cannot, Mr. Vance replied calmly. He placed his briefcase on the glass table, unclasped the silver locks, and opened it. He pulled out a thick document stamped with a golden seal. Your husband, Arthur, gave me very specific instructions before he passed. He knew the family would gather here this weekend. And he explicitly stated that this document was to be read right here, on this porch, in front of everyone. I stood there, still holding Lily's hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Lily was quiet now, wiping her tears with the back of her little sleeve, sensing that something massive was happening. Eleanor scoffed. Arthur's will was already processed a year ago. I received the house in the city, the investments, and the control of the family trust. There is nothing left to discuss. You received the temporary management of the trust, Eleanor, Mr. Vance corrected her, his voice sharp and precise. But your husband was a very smart man. He knew how you operated. He knew how you treated people. And more importantly, he saw exactly how you treated your own daughter and granddaughter. Julian stepped forward, his voice raised. Hey, watch your mouth, Vance. You're talking to my mother. Whatever my dad left behind, it goes to us. That's how it works. Mr. Vance looked at Julian with pity. Julian, your father knew you hadn't worked a single honest day in your life. He knew you relied completely on your mother's favoritism, which is exactly why he made sure you wouldn't get a single dime of his personal, private assets. Eleanor's face turned pale. What are you talking about? Arthur loved Julian. He loved justice more, Mr. Vance said. He opened the document and began to read aloud. The words cut through the hot summer air like a knife. I, Arthur Vance Pendleton, being of sound mind, execute this final codicil to my last will and testament. I am aware of the cruelty my wife, Eleanor, and my son, Julian, have shown toward my daughter, Clara. I have watched them try to diminish her worth. And I have seen the way they distance themselves from my beautiful granddaughter, Lily. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her chest. This is a lie. This is a forged document. Quiet, Eleanor, Mr. Vance said, authority dripping from his voice. He continued reading. Therefore, I hereby decree that the property known as the Pendleton Lake House, along with the surrounding 40 acres of prime lakefront land, and the private offshore fund containing $5 million, shall not pass to my wife. It shall not pass to my son. Julian grabbed the edge of the table. Then who does it go to? Mr. Vance stopped reading. He looked up from the paper, passed his eyes over Eleanor's trembling form, bypassed Julian completely, and looked directly at my 8-year-old daughter. Everything, Mr. Vance announced, the house, the land, and the $5 million maintenance trust, is left entirely, solely, and unconditionally to my granddaughter, Lily Pendleton, with her mother, Clara, serving as the absolute trustee until Lily turns 18. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Mr. Vance, then at the paper, then down at my little girl. $5 million? The lake house? The entire estate? My father didn't just leave us an inheritance. He left us a shield. He knew exactly what they would try to do to us once he was gone, and he had built a fortress around my daughter from beyond the grave. Eleanor's face deformed with a mixture of shock and sheer panic. The regal, sophisticated woman vanished, replaced by a terrified, angry child. No! Eleanor screamed, slamming her hand onto the wicker table, knocking her iced tea to the floor. The glass shattered into 100 pieces. That is impossible. Arthur wouldn't do this to me. I am his wife. This house is mine. I decorated it. I own this family. You own nothing here, Eleanor, Mr. Vance said, closing the folder with a definitive thud. As of 3 minutes ago, when this deed was officially verified by the state registry, you are a guest on private property. Property that belongs exclusively to the little girl you just called not family. Julian looked like he was about to faint. Wait. If the lake house belongs to Lily, and Clara controls the trust, what happens to the money mother was using to pay off my business debts? Mr. Vance smiled a cold, professional smile. That money was drawn from the Lake House Asset Fund, Julian. Which means as of right now those accounts are frozen. If you want a single cent to pay your debts, you'll have to ask your sister. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at my mother, the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel small, making me feel like an unwanted guest in the world. She was shaking. Her eyes were wide, darting from Mr. Vance to me. The power balance hadn't just shifted. It had been completely demolished. But the story didn't end there. Because when people like Eleanor lose power, they don't apologize. They don't learn their lesson. They get desperate. And a desperate monster is the most dangerous kind. The silence on the porch was so intense you could hear the buzzing of the dragonflies over the lake. Eleanor stood there, her chest heaving, staring at me as if she were looking at a ghost. The supreme confidence she had worn like armor just 10 minutes ago had completely dissolved. Julian was the first to break. He took a step toward me, his hands raised in a fake, placating gesture. Clara. Sis. Come on, he said, his voice forced and shaking. There's obviously been a massive misunderstanding here. Dad was sick at the end. He wasn't thinking clearly. You know how much Mom loves Lily. We all do. We were just joking earlier. Right, Mom? He turned to Eleanor, practically begging her with his eyes to play along. But Eleanor was too proud and too furious to play nice. I am not playing this game. Eleanor hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Clara, you will sign that property back over to me immediately. I don't care what your father wrote in some senile state of mind. I raised you. I clothed you. You owe me everything. You will instruct Mr. Vance to void this document, or I swear, I will cut you off from this family forever. I looked at her. I really looked at her. For 30 years, that threat, being cut off, being unloved, would have reduced me to tears. It would have made me beg for her forgiveness. But looking at her now, standing on the porch of a house she no longer owned, threatening me while my daughter stood beside me, I realized something incredibly liberating. You cannot cut off someone who has already walked away. No, Mom, I said. My voice was calm. It was steady. It was the quietest I had ever spoken to her. Yet it carried the weight of a thunderclap. "I won't sign anything." "What did you say?" she gasped. "I said no," I repeated, stepping forward, placing myself firmly between her and Lily. "For my entire life, I have been the ghost in your house. I watched you treat Julian like a king while you treated me like a servant. I stayed quiet because I thought it was my fault. I thought if I was better, you would love me. But today you showed me who you really are. You looked at a blameless 8-year-old child and tried to crush her spirit just to satisfy your own sick need for control. Clara, how dare you? No, Mom, how dare you?" I raised my voice, cutting her off completely. "This house belongs to Lily. My father knew exactly what you would do. He knew you would try to push us out the moment he was gone. He didn't lose his mind, Mom. He finally found his courage." Mr. Vance stepped forward, adjusting his suit jacket. "As the legal representative of the trust, I must advise you, Eleanor, and you, Julian, that you no longer have legal access to this property. The code to the security gates will be changed within the hour. The staff has been notified. Your personal belongings will need to be packed and removed immediately." Julian panicked. "Immediately? Vance, my boat is docked out there. My summer gear is in the cabin. We have guests coming next weekend for a party. Then I suggest you call them and cancel," Mr. Vance said without an ounce of sympathy. "Because next weekend, this house will be completely locked down." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes burning with pure malice. "You think you've won, don't you? You think because your father left you this old house, you're suddenly better than us? You're nothing, Clara. You've always been nothing. Let's see how well you manage this place without my connections, without my money, without my approval. I managed to raise a beautiful, kind daughter without your love, Mom," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "Managing a house will be easy. Pack your bags, Julian," Eleanor spat, turning on her heel. "We are leaving. Let her have this miserable swamp. We'll see how long she lasts when the bills start rolling in." "Actually, Eleanor," Mr. Vance chimed in, "one last card left to play. The $5 million trust covers all property taxes, maintenance, and staffing for the next 50 years. Clara won't have to pay a single dime out of pocket. However, since the trust is no longer funding your city lifestyle, I believe your own personal accounts will be heavily audited by the bank next week to recover Julian's outstanding loans." Eleanor froze at the top of the stairs, her back stiffening. She didn't look back. She just marched down the steps, her expensive shoes clicking angrily against the wood, with Julian scurrying behind her like a frightened puppy. Within 30 minutes, the roar of Julian's sports car and Eleanor's luxury sedan faded away down the gravel driveway, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust behind. The lake house was completely quiet. I sank down into one of the porch chairs, burying my face in my hands. The adrenaline was leaving my body, and the sheer weight of what had just happened washed over me. I started to cry, not out of sadness, but out of sheer, overwhelming relief. 30 years of heavy chains had just dropped from my shoulders. Suddenly, I felt too small, warm arms wrap around my neck. "Mommy, don't cry," Lily whispered, kissing my cheek. "We're safe now, right? Grandpa left us his favorite place." I pulled her into my lap, holding her tightly, looking out over the beautiful, sparkling lake. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered, wiping my eyes. "We are safe. And this is your home now." But as the sun began to set over the water, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. I pulled it out and read the words on the screen. "You think you can take everything from us and get away with it? This isn't over, Clara. Enjoy the house while you can. The war wasn't over. Eleanor and Julian were ruined, and when people like that lose everything, they don't go away quietly. They prepare to strike back." The next few weeks at the lake house were supposed to be a dream, but that single text message hung over my head like a dark storm cloud. Every time a branch scraped against the window at night, my heart would jump. Every time a boat cruised too close to our dock, I found myself standing at the window, watching through the blinds. David, my husband, joined us after a week of wrapping up his work in the city. When I told him everything that had happened, he was stunned. He held me tightly, telling me he was proud of me for standing up to them. But he also shared my worry. Your mother has spent her entire life controlling everyone around her. David warned me as we sat by the fireplace one evening. She's not just going to let an 8-year-old girl keep a $5 million estate without a fight. Be careful, Clara. He was right. It started with small things. Legal notices began arriving in the mail. Eleanor had hired a high-priced, aggressive law firm from the city. They were trying to contest my father's will, claiming that he was not in his right mind when he signed the codicil, or that I had somehow manipulated him into changing it. Every time a new letter arrived, I would send it straight to Mr. Vance. Don't worry about these, Clara, Mr. Vance reassured me over the phone. Your father knew exactly what they would try to do. He went to 3 different independent doctors before signing that document to prove he was in perfect mental health. He recorded video depositions. He left an airtight trail. They are just trying to scare you into a settlement. But when the legal scare tactics didn't work, Eleanor and Julian resorted to something much more sinister. One Tuesday morning, I drove into the local town to pick up groceries, leaving David and Lily at the house. As I walked down the aisle of the small town market, I noticed people were staring at me. The cashier, a sweet older woman named Martha who had known my father for years, looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sadness. Clara, dear, Martha said in a low voice as she scanned my items. I've known your family a long time. Your father was a good man. But, is it true what they're saying? I frowned, a bad feeling forming in my stomach. What are they saying, Martha? Martha hesitated, looking around before leaning in. Your brother, Julian. He's been in town, talking to the local business owners, the marina managers, even the local police department. He's telling everyone that you stole the lake house. He's saying you cut your elderly mother off from her medicine, that you locked her out of her own home, and that you're keeping your father's money all to yourself while your family suffers. My blood ran cold. That is a complete lie. My mother kicked us out. My father left the house to Lily, because of how they treated her. I know, Martha said quickly, patting my hand. Those who knew your dad know he wouldn't do something without a good reason. But Julian is making a lot of noise. He's trying to ruin your reputation around here. He's trying to make sure no one in this town will work with you, or help you maintain that property. I left the store trembling with anger. They couldn't win legally, so they were trying to destroy my name. They wanted to make our lives so miserable, so uncomfortable, that we would abandon the house out of pure shame. When I got back to the lake house, I found a luxury SUV parked near our front gate. My heart skipped a beat. I parked my car, got out, and walked toward the gate. Standing there, looking through the iron bars at our property, was Julian's wife, Vanessa. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a designer handbag. What are you doing here, Vanessa? I demanded, my voice tight. Vanessa turned around, slowly taking off her sunglasses. She looked at me with a fake, sweet smile that made my skin crawl. Oh, Clara. I was just looking at the old place. It's a shame, really. It looks so lonely without us. You don't belong here. Leave, I said, reaching for my phone. Oh, calm down, Vanessa scoffed, her tone turning sharp. I'm just here to deliver a friendly message from your mother. She's willing to make this all go away. The lawsuits, the town gossip, the stress. All you have to do is sign over 50% of the lakefront land to Julian and give your mother a monthly allowance from that $5 million trust. If you do that, we can be a happy family again. I laughed out loud. It was a bitter, sharp laugh. A happy family? You mean you want me to fund Julian's failed businesses and pay for my mother's luxury lifestyle after she told my daughter she wasn't family? Vanessa's smile completely vanished. Her eyes went cold. Think carefully, Clara. Julian is desperate. He owes a lot of dangerous people a lot of money. If he goes down, he's taking you down with him. We will make your life a living hell. We will make sure everyone knows you as the greedy daughter who ruined her own family. Are you threatening me? I asked, holding my phone up. Because I am recording this entire conversation. Vanessa looked at the phone, her jaw tightening. She stepped back into her SUV and rolled down the window. You think you're safe inside those gates, Clara? You're not. This house belongs to us. And we will take it back, one way or another. She slammed the gas pedal, kicking up dust and rocks as she sped away. I stood there, watching her go, a deep sense of dread settling over me. Julian was desperate. Vanessa had admitted it. He owed money to dangerous people, and he was looking at my daughter's inheritance as his personal get-out-of-jail-free card. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring out at the dark lake. The words kept echoing in my head. We will take it back, one way or another. I realized then that playing defense wasn't enough anymore. They weren't going to stop. They were going to keep pushing, keep lying, and keep threatening my child until they got what they wanted. If I wanted to protect Lily, if I wanted to truly honor my father's final wish, I had to stop running. I had to stop hiding behind lawyers. It was time to set a trap. It was time to give them exactly what they wanted. Or at least, make them think they were getting it. The next morning, I called Mr. Vance. I didn't want to involve David in this part of the plan because David was a good man, a gentle man, and he believed in the law. But I knew the law moves too slowly when you are dealing with desperate, greedy monsters. Mr. Vance, I said into the phone, my voice cold and determined. I need you to help me arrange a meeting. I want to invite Eleanor and Julian back to the lake house. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Clara, are you certain? After the threats they've made, and the rumors they're spreading in town, bringing them back onto the property could be dangerous. Legally, you have no obligation to speak to them ever again. I know, I replied, looking out the window at Lily, who was happily playing with her father on the grass. But they are never going to stop. They will spend the next 10 years trying to tear my life apart. Julian is desperate for money, and my mother is desperate for pride. I want to give them an offer they can't refuse. But I need you to set up a very specific piece of paperwork for me. I explained my plan to Mr. Vance. As I spoke, I could hear his sharp intake of breath through the phone. Clara. That is incredibly risky, he said, his voice laced with caution. If they catch on to what you're doing, it could blow up in your face. They won't catch on, I said firmly. Their arrogance is their biggest weakness. They truly believe I am weak. They believe that if they push me hard enough, I will break. So, let's show them exactly what they want to see. Let's show them a broken Clara. 2 days later, the invitation was sent. I texted Julian directly. I can't take the stress anymore. The town is turning against me. The legal fees are piling up, and David and I are fighting. Let's settle this. Come to the lake house this Saturday at noon. Bring Mom. Let's sign the paperwork and divide the assets so we can all move on. Within 5 minutes, Julian replied, Smart choice, Clara. See you Saturday. Don't try anything stupid. When Saturday arrived, the weather was gloomy. Gray clouds covered the sky, and a chilly wind was blowing across the lake, creating dark, choppy waves. It was the perfect backdrop for what was about to happen. I had sent David and Lily into the city for the weekend under the guise of a fun family trip. I didn't want Lily anywhere near this house when Eleanor arrived. I wanted the house to feel empty, cold, and vulnerable. At exactly noon, the sound of heavy tires on the gravel announced their arrival. I stood in the kitchen, taking a deep breath, centering myself. I checked my phone one last time. The hidden security cameras my father had installed years ago, cameras that Eleanor didn't even know existed, were fully operational. They were streaming live audio and video directly to a secure cloud drive, and to Mr. Vance's office in the city. I walked out to the living room just as the front door swung open. Eleanor walked in first, wearing a long black coat, looking around the room with an expression of supreme triumph. Julian followed closely behind, carrying a sleek leather folder, a confident, predatory smirk plastered across his face. Well, Julian said, looking around the room. Look who finally came to her senses. I told you, Mom, she doesn't have the stomach for a real fight. Eleanor stopped in the center of the room, looking at me with cold disdain. You look tired, Clara. I suppose reality has finally set in. You honestly thought you could steal from me and live like a queen? You're just a little girl playing dress-up in a house that belongs to a real family. I forced myself to look down, pretending to squeeze my hands together in anxiety. I needed to play the part perfectly. I just wanted to stop, I said, my voice shaky, sounding as if I were on the verge of tears. The people in town won't even look at me. The legal fees are draining our personal savings. David is furious with me for dragging our family into this mess. You won, Mom. Okay. You won. I just want peace. Julian laughed, a harsh grating sound. He stepped forward and slammed his leather folder onto the heavy wooden coffee table. Peace has a price, Clara, Julian said, opening the folder to reveal several official-looking documents. This is a full asset transfer agreement. It states that you, as the trustee of Lily's estate, are relinquishing 50% of the lakefront property to my development company. It also states that you will transfer $2 million from the maintenance trust into a private account managed by Mom, as a familial reconciliation settlement. I looked at the papers, then looked up at Eleanor. $2 million? Mom, that money is for Lily's future. That's for her education, for her life. If I take that much out, the trust won't be able to maintain the house long-term. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes flashing with a terrifying intensity. I don't care about Lily's education, Clara. I told you, that child is not my family. She doesn't deserve a single cent of Arthur's wealth. That money belongs to Julian and me. We built this family's name while you were nothing but a disappointment. But Mom, I pleaded, leaning over the table, making sure my voice was clear and loud enough for the hidden microphones. You already have the city house and the main trust. Why are you doing this to your own granddaughter? Is it just because you hate me? Eleanor laughed, a cold, aristocratic chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. Hate you? Clara, I don't think about you enough to hate you, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with venom. You were always a mistake. An afterthought. And your daughter is just an extension of your insignificance. We are taking this money because we can. Because you are weak. And because Julian needs to clear his debts before the authorities start looking into his company's books. Your father was an old fool to think he could protect you from me. Now sign the papers, or I will make sure the local child services receive an anonymous tip about how unstable you are as a mother. There it was. The ultimate confession. She didn't just admit to extortion. She admitted to targeting an innocent child, and she admitted to Julian's financial fraud. All caught on high-definition audio and video. The trap was completely sprung. I slowly stood up straight. The shaky, terrified expression on my face vanished. I wiped away the fake anxiety, smoothed down my sweater, and looked at my mother with a sample, freezing smile. No, I said softly. Julian's smirk faltered. What do you mean, no? Clara, we just told you what will happen if you don't sign. I know what you said, Julian, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. I tapped the screen, turning off the recording app that was broadcasting to the cloud. And more importantly, the state police, the district attorney, and the financial audit board just heard every single word of it, too. For a few seconds, the room went entirely white with silence. Julian's hand remained frozen over the leather folder. Eleanor's eyes darted from my face to the phone in my hand, her expression shifting from absolute triumph to a sudden, creeping fear. What? What are you talking about? Julian stammered, his voice dropping an octave. What do you mean, broadcasting? I pointed calmly up toward the exposed wooden beams of the high ceiling. Hidden neatly within the decorative woodwork was a small, blinking blue light. Then I pointed toward the stone fireplace, where another tiny lens was aimed directly at the coffee table. My father built this house, Julian. He knew every nook and cranny, I said, my voice completely steady, filled with a power I hadn't felt in my entire life. And when he installed the security system 5 years ago, he made sure the primary server was locked in a private vault that only his personal attorney could access. Every word you just said, every threat against my daughter, your admission of corporate fraud, your plan to extort money from a child's trust, and your threat to blackmail me with false child service reports. It was all recorded. It's already in the hands of the authorities. Julian's face went completely pale. He looked at the ceiling, then back at me, his breathing becoming fast and shallow. You trapped us. You set us up. No, Julian. You trapped yourselves, I replied. Your own greed walked you right through that front door. I gave you a choice to leave us alone. I gave you weeks to walk away and live your lives with the millions you already have in the city. But you couldn't stand the fact that I finally had something you couldn't touch. Eleanor stepped forward, her teeth clenched, her regal facade completely shattered. She looked like a monster cornered in the dark. You think a little recording is going to destroy me? Eleanor screamed, her voice cracking with rage. I am Eleanor Pendleton. I know the judges in the city. I know the mayor. I will have this thrown out of court before the week is over. You are nothing but a treacherous, ungrateful little snake. She raised her hand, stepping toward me as if she were going to strike me across the face, just like she used to do when I was a teenager who dared to speak out of turn. But I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground, looking her dead in the eye. Touch me, Mom, I whispered. Go ahead. Add physical assault on camera to the list of charges. See how well your city connections work when the local news station gets a hold of the footage of a wealthy socialite attacking her daughter over a child's inheritance. Eleanor's hand shook in the air. She stopped, mere inches from my face, her breath hot against my skin. Slowly, painfully, she lowered her hand. Her chest was heaving, her eyes filled with a hatred so profound it chilled me to the bone. Just then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the front porch. The front door, which had been left cracked open, was pushed wide. Mr. Vance walked in, accompanied by two men in dark suits wearing federal badges, and two local police officers. Julian spun around, his eyes widening in pure panic. Oh my God, Mom, what do we do? One of the men with federal badges stepped forward, pulling a document from his coat pocket. Julian Pendleton? I am Special Agent Miller with the Financial Crimes Division. We have been conducting an ongoing audit into your development company for the past 3 months regarding missing investor funds. Based on the real-time evidence of extortion and admission of asset concealment we just witnessed, we have a warrant for your arrest. Julian stumbled backward, knocking over a wooden chair. Wait. No. It was a joke. I was just trying to get what my dad owed me. Mom, tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. But Eleanor didn't say a word. She stood frozen, staring at the officers as they walked over to Julian, grabbed his arms, and pulled them behind his back, clicking the cold steel handcuffs around his wrists. Clara, please, don't do this. Julian yelled as he was dragged toward the door, his expensive loafers scraping against the floorboards. I'm your brother. We're family. Family is a strict term, Julian, I said, repeating the exact words Eleanor had used against my daughter on that very porch. And you don't fit the description. As Julian was led out to the police cruiser, his cries fading into the rainy afternoon, Agent Miller turned his attention to Eleanor. Mrs. Pendleton, the agent said, his voice firm and completely unimpressed by her status. While you are not being arrested today, you are officially being served with a federal subpoena. Your personal bank accounts, the family trust, and the city estate are being frozen pending a full investigation into your complicity in your son's financial fraud. You are advised not to leave the state. Eleanor looked at the piece of paper the agent handed her, as if it were a piece of burning garbage. She didn't look at the officer. She slowly turned her head and looked at me. The silence between us was heavier than the storm outside. You have destroyed this family, Clara, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet whisper. You have ruined your brother. You have ruined me. I hope you are proud of yourself. I didn't destroy this family, Mom. Your arrogance did, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. You can leave now. And don't ever come back to my daughter's house. Eleanor turned around, her head held high, trying to maintain a shred of her pathetic dignity, and walked out the front door into the rain. I watched through the window as her luxury SUV drove away, followed by the flashing blue lights of the police cruiser. The house was finally, truly quiet. I collapsed onto the sofa, my whole body shaking. The war was finally over. The monsters were gone. But as I sat alone in the empty living room, listening to the rain beat against the glass, I knew that the real healing was only just beginning. A month passed after that chaotic rainy day, and the ripples of what happened at the lake house shook our entire extended family and the local community. The news of Julian's arrest hit the city papers within 48 hours. It turned out his financial crimes were far worse than any of us had realized. He hadn't just mismanaged investor money. He had run a massive pyramid scheme, using his mother's high society reputation to trick wealthy people into investing in fake real estate developments. When his debts started piling up, he had turned to Eleanor for help, and Eleanor, desperate to keep her golden child out of prison, had planned to use Lily's Lake House Trust to cover up the missing funds. They were never planning to just share the land with me. They were planning to completely drain the $5 million trust, sell the lake house to a commercial developer, and leave my daughter with absolutely nothing. When Mr. Vance came over to the lake house to give us the final legal updates, we sat on the porch drinking coffee. The weather was beautiful again, the sun reflecting off the calm water like diamonds. Lily was down by the dock with David, learning how to fish, her laughter echoing across the yard. The federal investigators found everything, Clara, Mr. Vance said, taking a sip from his mug. Your father's security footage was the final piece of the puzzle they needed. It proved intent, it proved extortion, and it completely destroyed Julian's legal defense. He's looking at a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. And my mother? I asked quietly, looking out at Lily. Mr. Vance sighed. Eleanor's situation is different. Because she didn't technically sign any fraudulent documents herself, she won't face prison time. However, the courts have ordered a full liquidation of the city trust to pay back Julian's victims. The city house, her luxury cars, her expensive jewelry, it's all being sold at auction. She is completely broke, Clara. She's been forced to move into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, living off a basic state pension. I felt a strange mix of emotions. I thought I would feel a sense of grand triumph, a moment of deep, vengeful joy. But looking out at the water, all I felt was a profound sense of peace. The woman who had made me feel like an outsider my entire life was now completely powerless, stripped of the only thing she ever truly loved. Her status. Your father would be very proud of you, Clara, Mr. Vance said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. He always felt guilty that he couldn't protect you more while he was alive. He stayed with Eleanor because he knew that if he divorced her, she would use her wealth and lawyers to take you away from him completely. He chose to stay, to build this quiet safety net so that when the time was right, you and Lily would be taken care of forever. Tears welled up in my eyes. I looked up at the sky, whispering a quiet thank you to the man who had loved me enough to play the long game. After Mr. Vance left, I walked down to the dock to join David and Lily. As I approached, Lily ran up to me, holding a tiny fishing rod. Mommy, look. Daddy and I caught a fish. But we put it back in the water so it could go home to its family, she said, her eyes shining with innocence and joy. I knelt down and pulled her into a tight hug, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair. That's beautiful, sweetheart. You have a very kind heart. Mommy, Lily asked, looking at me curiously. Is Grandma Eleanor ever coming back here? I looked at David, who gave me a supportive smile, then looked back at my daughter. No, Lily, I said gently, wiping a stray strand of hair from her face. Grandma Eleanor won't be coming back. She has her own life to live now. Is it because she doesn't think I'm family? Lily asked softly, her voice carrying a hint of that old hurt. My heart ached, but I shook my head firmly. No, my love. It's because she never understood what family actually means. Family isn't about houses or money or status. Family is about the people who love you, the people who protect you, and the people who make you feel safe. And you have the biggest, strongest family in the world right here. Lily smiled, her doubts completely melting away, and ran back to the edge of the dock to watch the water ripples. I stood up, wrapping my arm around David's waist as he pulled me close. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me I didn't belong. The justice we received wasn't just about winning a legal battle or seeing our abusers punished. The real justice was looking at my daughter and knowing that she would grow up in a world where she would never, ever have to question her worth. 6 months later, the dust had completely settled. The local town of Blackwood had undergone a massive shift in how they looked at us. Once the truth of Julian's crimes and the recording of Eleanor's behavior became public knowledge, the townspeople felt a deep sense of shame for ever believing their lies. Martha, the sweet cashier from the market, came up to the lake house personally one weekend, bringing a homemade apple pie as an apology. "Clara, we are so incredibly sorry," Martha said, her eyes filled with genuine regret as we stood on the porch. "We should have known better. Your father Arthur was the most honorable man this town ever knew, and the fact that we listened to your brother's vile rumors. We just feel terrible. Please know that you and your family are always welcome here." "Thank you, Martha," I said, accepting the pie with a warm smile. "I don't blame anyone. My mother and brother are very good at manipulating people. I'm just glad the truth is finally out." And that was the beautiful thing about the truth. It takes a long time to arrive sometimes, and the journey can be incredibly painful, but once it settles in, nothing can wash it away. The lake house became a hub of genuine love and laughter. David and I used a small portion of the trust money to renovate the old cabin, turning it into an art studio for Lily and a workshop for David. We hired local contractors, paying them generously, which helped rebuild our relationship with the town. Every weekend, the house was filled with the sounds of life, friends visiting from the city, outdoor barbecues, and Lily running around the yard with a rescue puppy we had adopted. But there was still one final piece of business I had to take care of. A piece of business that required me to leave the safety of the lake house and go back into the city. Julian's trial was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. He had agreed to a plea deal to avoid a maximum 30-year sentence, accepting a 15-year prison term instead. Because I was the key witness who provided the digital evidence, I was required to attend the final sentencing hearing. David offered to come with me, but I shook my head. "No, honey. This is something I need to face alone. I need to close this chapter by myself." The city courthouse was cold, sterile, and gray. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw Eleanor sitting in the front row of the gallery. I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who used to wear expensive Chanel suits and diamond necklaces was wearing a plain, faded gray coat. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was pinned back loosely. Her shoulders were slouched, and she looked 20 years older than she actually was. When she heard the courtroom doors open, she turned around and looked at me. There was no rage left in her eyes. There was no arrogance. There was only a profound, hollow emptiness. I walked past her without saying a word and took my seat at the prosecutor's table. A few minutes later, Julian was brought in through a side door. He was wearing a bright orange inmate jumpsuit, his hands and feet chained together. The clinking of the metal chains echoed loudly in the quiet room. He looked thin, pale, and completely broken. The arrogant smirk he had worn his entire life was completely gone. As the judge read aloud the terms of the sentencing, I watched Julian's head drop. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at the floor, tears streaming down his face as the reality of his 15-year sentence finally became real. When the hearing concluded, the guard stood Julian up to lead him back to his cell. As he turned toward the door, his eyes met mine. I expected to feel a surge of anger, or maybe a sense of vindication. But all I felt was deep pity. He had thrown away his entire life, his freedom, and his future, all because he wanted to maintain a fake illusion of wealth and power that his mother had forced upon him. He gave me a weak, desperate nod, as if silently asking for a forgiveness I couldn't give him. And then he walked through the door, the heavy steel lock clicking behind him. The courtroom began to empty out. I stood up, adjusting my coat, ready to leave the city behind forever. But as I walked down the center aisle, Eleanor stood up from her bench, blocking my path. I stopped. The court officers watched us closely, but I raised my hand slightly to show them it was okay. "Clara," Eleanor said, her voice cracking, sounding incredibly weak. Please, talk to me for just a moment. I looked at her, my face expressionless. What do you want, Mom? Julian. He won't survive 15 years in there, she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. And me. I have nothing left, Clara. They took the house. They took my savings. I am living in a terrible place. I can barely afford groceries. You have $5 million in that trust. Please, Clara. You're my daughter. Help your mother. Just a little bit of money to help me get a proper apartment. I looked at the woman who had brought me into the world. The woman who had spent decades making me feel like an unwanted stranger. She was begging me for the very money she had tried to steal from my child. The irony was breathtaking. Do you remember what you told me on the porch that day, Mom? I asked her, my voice quiet, completely calm. Eleanor looked down, her lower lip trembling. I was angry, Clara. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did, I replied. You meant every single word. You looked at my 8-year-old daughter and told her she wasn't family because she didn't fit your standard of status. You tried to ruin my life, destroy my reputation, and steal her future to save a son who committed federal crimes. Clara, please. I am your mother. She cried out, reaching her hand out to touch my sleeve. I stepped back, out of her reach. A mother protects her children. Eleanor, I said, using her first name for the very first time. A mother loves unconditionally. You were never a mother to me. You were just a landlord who made me pay for my existence with my own self-worth. The money in that trust belongs entirely to Lily. And as the trustee, I have a legal and moral duty to protect it from people who don't know how to love. Goodbye, Eleanor. I walked past her, the sound of her quiet sobbing fading away as I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courtroom. As I walked down the stone steps of the courthouse, the crisp autumn wind hit my face. I took a deep, full breath of fresh air. For the first time in 35 years, I felt completely light. I felt entirely free. I got into my car and turned the key, the GPS screen lighting up with the route back to the lake house. Back to my husband. Back to my daughter. Back to the only family that ever truly mattered. 1 year after the trial, the lake house had undergone a complete spiritual transformation. The dark energy that Eleanor and Julian had left behind had completely evaporated, replaced by a house that was constantly filled with warmth, music, and the smell of fresh baking. Lily was now 9 years old, growing taller, her artistic talents blooming in the studio we had built for her. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon in late spring. The apple trees my father had planted years ago were in full bloom, covering the backyard in beautiful pink and white blossoms. We were hosting a special celebration, Lily's 9th birthday party, and the official anniversary of our permanent move to the lake. Nearly half the town of Blackwood was there. Martha from the market brought a giant birthday cake. The local marina workers were helping David take the kids out on safe, supervised pontoon boat rides, and the neighbors were sitting on the wraparound porch, laughing and sharing stories. I stood at the edge of the lawn, holding a glass of lemonade, watching the scene before me. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be standing here, completely secure, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, living in the house of my dreams with a secure future for my daughter, I would have thought you were crazy. I had spent so much of my life trapped in a prison of someone else's making, believing that I was lesser than, that I didn't deserve happiness. David walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders, resting his chin on the top of my head. Look at what you built, Clara, he whispered, watching Lily blow out the candles on her cake across the lawn. I didn't build it alone, I said, leaning back into his embrace. My dad laid the foundation. He just needed me to find the courage to stand on it. You did more than just find courage, honey. You broke a cycle, David said gently. The pain that Eleanor passed down to you ends right here. Lily will never know what it feels like to be an outsider. She will never have to earn her right to be loved. That is your real victory. His words hit me deep in my chest. He was right. The $5 million was incredible, and the lake house was a beautiful gift, but the true wealth we inherited was the ability to raise our child in absolute emotional safety. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a trail of deep gold and midnight blue across the lake, I walked up to Lily's bedroom to tuck her into bed. The room was filled with stuffed animals, her own colorful paintings of the lake, and a framed photograph of my father holding her when she was just a baby. As I pulled the blankets up to her chin, Lily looked up at me with her big, bright eyes. "Mommy, today was the best day ever." "I'm so glad, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. "You deserve the best days." "Mommy, do you remember when Grandpa Arthur used to take you to the lake when you were little?" she asked, turning her head toward the window that looked out over the water. "I do," I smiled, a warm wave of nostalgia washing over me. "We used to sit right out there on the dock, watching the fireflies just like you do now." "I think Grandpa is still here sometimes," Lily said softly, her voice filled with a child's beautiful faith. "Every time the wind blows through the trees and the lake makes that pretty splashing sound, I feel like he's whispering that he loves us." Tears, warm and happy, slipped down my cheeks. I wiped them away quickly, smiling down at her. "I think he is too, Lily. He loved you more than anything in the world." "Good night, Mommy," she murmured, her eyes drifting shut, completely relaxed, completely safe. "Good night, my beautiful girl," I whispered, turning off the bedside lamp and stepping out into the hallway, closing the door softly behind me. I walked downstairs and out onto the wraparound porch. The night air was cool and crisp. The fireflies were dancing over the dark grass, and the moon was reflected perfectly on the glassy surface of the lake. I walked down the wooden steps, across the soft grass, and stood at the very edge of the dock where my mother had once stood and tried to shatter my world. I looked out at the vast, peaceful water. I realized then that revenge is a funny thing. When this journey started, I thought revenge meant fighting back, making them pay, and seeing them suffer. But as I stood there in the quiet night, I realized that the best revenge isn't malicious. The best revenge is living a beautiful, happy, successful life in spite of the people who tried to destroy you. Eleanor and Julian had sought power through control, greed, and cruelty, and it had left them entirely alone, broke, and locked away in dark rooms. David, Lily, and I had sought peace through love, truth, and kindness, and it had given us the entire world. My father's final wish had been completely fulfilled. The house didn't just belong to us on paper anymore. It belonged to us in spirit. We were finally home. If you are still listening to my story, I want you to take a deep breath and truly hear what I am about to tell you. Life has a strange way of balancing the scales. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes years, and sometimes, like in my case, it takes an entire lifetime. But the universe never forgets a debt, and it never ignores the cries of an innocent heart. For 30 years, I lived under the impression that blood-dictating family meant I owed my abusers my loyalty. I thought that because Eleanor was the woman who gave me life, I was obligated to tolerate her toxicity, her cruelty, and her constant attempts to make me feel small. I know there are many of you out there listening to this right now who are experiencing the exact same thing. You are staying in toxic situations, tolerating cruel relatives, or letting people crush your spirit because you think that walking away makes you a bad person. You think that if you just endure a little more, if you give them one more chance, they will finally change and love you. But I am here to tell you, as a peer who walked through that fire and came out stronger on the other side, some people will never change. Some people are so consumed by their own ego, their own greed, and their own need for control that they are entirely incapable of seeing the beauty and value in your soul. And the moment you realize that their treatment of you is a reflection of their brokenness, not your worth, that is the exact moment you become truly free. My mother told my 8-year-old daughter that she wasn't family. She thought that by using those harsh, exclusive words, she was protecting her kingdom. But her arrogance blinded her to the fact that her kingdom was built on sand, and that the quiet man she had spent her life manipulating had already built a fortress of justice around the daughter she despised. True family isn't defined by a last name, or a genetic code, or a legal document. True family is found in the people who stand by you when the storm is raging. It's found in the people who look at your flaws and love you anyway. It's found in the quiet moments of safety, the shared laughter, and the unconditional protection of your peace. If you have people in your life who make you feel like an unwanted guest in your own skin, you have the absolute right to pack your bags and walk away. You do not owe your abusers your future just because they were part of your past. As I sit here on the porch of the lake house, watching my daughter grow up surrounded by real love, I look back at the pain of my past with gratitude, not because the pain was good, but because it taught me exactly what kind of mother, what kind of wife, and what kind of human being I wanted to be. Be patient. Stay strong in your truth. Keep your heart kind, even when the world is cruel around you, because at the end of the day, the greedy will always destroy themselves with their own traps, and the righteous will always inherit the house. Thank you for listening to my story. Protect your peace, love your true family fiercely, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. Good night.